Meanwhile, at the Legion of Doom,
DEI is under attack. So Charlene, with your purview, what would you advise our audience here today as a response to what they're hearing within their own corporate walls?
Unfortunately, our community has a legacy of dealing with attack. So whatever you need to call it, do the work, period. This work informs your strategies. This work makes your team stronger. This work informs where the next big thing will come from, how you stay current, and how you can stay a leading edge brand or content provider. So if the acronym bothers you, change the acronym.
Yeah.
In the business, we call this foreshadowing.
Hello again. This is Umbra, Lord of the Rees, Master of Autism, and the Scourge of Chicken Tendies. For those returning, I thank you for coming back. I am humbled to earn your repeat views, and for those new, I hope to earn your likes, shares, comments, and subscriptions. This video is meant to serve as a primer for those who want to understand just what the heck is going on with the culture war, and I would recommend watching these videos before going off on social media, at least if you don't want to make a donkey of yourself. Today, I am going to talk about something that is a bit more in the weeds. I'm sure you've heard of the term DEI, but it's not clear exactly what it means. I hope to explain DEI, how it ties into E.S.G, and what this new BRIDGE initiative seeks to do. So, what is DEI? The people screaming about it seem to blame it for everything, yet don't seem to be able to concisely say what it actually means and how it is affecting things. Well, once you understand what it actually is, you will probably be screaming about it too. Or be very, very concerned about it, at the very least. DEI is an acronym that stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. While it does sound fine on the surface, those words do sound like good things, they're actually far more insidious. Let's dissect this, shall we? Diversity is something meant to smokescreen what they are actually doing. To understand why it's a smokescreen, one needs to be familiar with critical theory. This was the topic of my last video, so I will touch on it briefly here. Critical theory is the idea that people can only exist in a dynamic of oppression, and the only way to right the scales of oppression is to oppress the oppressors. In this case, whatever the majority group is. Diversity in this context does not mean an actual organic diversity of perspective and ideas, but to push as many non-majority identities in as possible. This is why a movie like Black Panther with a 90% black cast is called diverse. This is not actually diversity, but critical theory in disguise. Equity is not equality. Equity is about ensuring the same outcomes for different people, regardless of their ability or circumstances, and since it is more difficult to boost up people that are behind others, it takes the form of hamstringing people with advantages. Advantages such as skills, talents, and competence. Giving opportunities to the less qualified while blunting the advancement of others with supposedly unfair advantages, so on and so on. Equity is best described in the short story Harrison Bergeron and the concept of the handicapper general from that story. The handicapper general forces people to wear devices that handicap them so they don't outperform the lowest common denominator. The last part, inclusion, is a circular reference to diversity. It's meant to make it sound better because people naturally like to make other people feel included. The fact of the matter, though, is that if you are intentionally including certain people in a place with a finite number of slots or seats, you are intentionally excluding others. We all know one form of this type of inclusion. It's called nepotism, where you are including people you know or are related to you or someone you know, rather than by merit. There is also another messy issue. Who decides what criteria to use for inclusion? By making inclusion a conscious choice, you are also making exclusion a conscious choice as well. So when they say diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're actually saying conformity, unfairness, and exclusion towards people who match characteristics they do not like. And remember, they can change which characteristics they don't like whenever they want. People have begun to recognize the actual effects and tendencies of these programs, especially with the U.S. Supreme Court decision finding these diversity programs to be in direct contradiction of civil rights laws. The decision about college admissions and programs has caused companies to rebrand under BRIDGE. However, before I get into that, I want to get into why companies are even doing this. E.S.G. It's a social credit score for businesses. E.S.G. is the reason companies are doing this for the most part. E.S.G. stands for environmental, social, and governance, which, much like D.E.I, uses these words that sound like good things as a smokescreen. They claim to be scoring based on corporate responsibility. I want you to imagine the biggest possible quotation marks around corporate responsibility. And this begs the question, who is deciding what responsible corporate practices are? Up until recently, it was people like Klaus Schwab and Larry Fink, unelected oligarchs with more money than God, who are using that money to control what other people do based on what they themselves want to see. I understand this sounds conspiratorial, and honestly, I wouldn't even believe it myself if they didn't actually openly say this was what they were doing. Let's hear from Larry Fink himself. Grab some popcorn and, or if you were like me, you're going to need a beer.
You now make a point of that's an investment criteria for you.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. 54% of the incoming class are women. We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year, and what we are doing internally is if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted. Okay,
we're doing the same thing.
And so it's just you have to force behaviors, and if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted, and that's not recruiting, it is development, as Ken said. And ultimately, it's still going to take time, but I am just as much shocked as Ken is that we have not seen more opportunities, and we're going to have to force change.
It's a paranoid conspiracy theory if I'm making connections that don't exist. If I am literally just reporting what these people are outright saying they are doing, I am simply reporting the news. ESG is used by investors to determine which companies should get actual capital and lines of credit to maintain their businesses. Since most large corporations are using leveraged debt to maintain their operations between product releases, that investor capital can be the difference between maintaining and growing their operations or mass layoffs. ESG itself pays lip service to making things better, but is really just a measurement of DEI and political alignment with the approved message rather than doing what it says it is. For example, ExxonMobil, the oil company with all the oil spills, have a near perfect ESG score, while companies like Tesla, the company that is putting out electric vehicles and reducing overall consumption of fossil fuels, they have a bottom level score. It becomes very clear that the S or social part of this is the only part that truly matters. I'm not making up conspiracies. I'm simply taking Larry Fink and Klaus Schwab's words about the program they started and spearheaded at face value. Forcing behaviors and stakeholder capitalism are important words to listen to, especially stakeholder capitalism. Stakeholder capitalism is essentially saying that everyone that can be affected by a company owns a stake in it. And since we have global companies that constantly affect everyone, that means that, according to stakeholder capitalism, everyone technically owns every company. Yes, it's just communism with extra steps. So we get to Bridge. When in doubt, you rebrand, right? Now, I do have to take a moment to thank Kersha for this, the great, glorious fox that managed to actually kind of break this story. Bridge is a newer initiative originally meant to be another way to measure how well corporations and businesses were pushing DEI into their companies. However, rather than simply having a DEI department that you put in a corner of HR to complain and throw darts at the board while you try to ignore them to run your company, Bridge bakes DEI into the hiring process, making it so that you have to constantly push and espouse the ideas of DEI and critical theory into everything you do, on every level. Otherwise, you are pushed out of the company for wrongthink. Don't believe me? Let's listen to what they have to say. And remember my handy guide for words they use versus what they actually mean when they use them. Let's take a look. Pause the video if you need to get another beer or more popcorn. I know I do.
It moves the conversation away from opinions and beliefs, and it puts it into business practices, right? Exactly, data. So, we can stop arguing about whether it's a moral imperative or it's not a moral imperative, or we're taking jobs away or we're not, or it just, none of that matters. The issue is, what are your business practices that are contributing to an inclusive brand?
Yeah.
Period.
I love this framework. I love this, this index, this assessment that you have, because again, it's not just, oh, this is just a marketing tool.
Right.
Bridge involves purity tests during the hiring process, only hiring people that believe in their version of DEI, making it so that the entire workforce is people that believe in it and pushing out anyone that disagrees. The danger here is they're trying to create a world where you have to accept their ideology to even get a job. They're making the simple act of hiring for and running a business political. I think it's a good time to remind you of a very important fact. A certain spicy Italian moose man from the World War II era described the ideology that starts with an F, the ideology that people are always screaming and accusing other people of being. Yeah, that ideology is referred to as a, quote, lucrative marriage between corporation and state, end quote. Looking and seeing how these businesses are becoming so married to a political ideology that they are trying to include into every aspect of their business really seems to fit that bill now, don't it? In conclusion, I can summarize the previous few minutes thus. DEI is a policy that focuses on intentionally excluding whoever is not considered diverse or inclusive enough with critical theory-based solutions, which are revenge-based solutions, using rapidly changing definitions set forth by oligarchs who are using their money and influence to make such allegiance to their politics mandatory to get the money to continue to grow their operations. Bridge is the next step to make DEI such a core part of how businesses are run that they can try to avoid detection while also strangling anyone out economically who would protest. All of this being an attempt to use progressive language as a smokescreen to cover for what are the beginning stages of fascism in our own economic system. I know this sounds crazy, but that is the entire reason they've gotten away for so long doing it out in the open. It's so insane that people just can't recognize it at first glance. They just cannot believe what they're seeing. I know I had difficulty. I hope this has been a helpful and useful video. I was hoping to clarify these ideas and terms in an easy to understand and digestible way. Please like, share, and subscribe if you believe I have earned it. I humbly thank you for so generously spending your time with me today and hope to continue to upload more frequently. And above and beyond all else, to anyone out there, please remember, passion is nothing to be ashamed of. Stay passionate for what you love and fight back, because passion is the only thing that makes life worth living. Thank you, and good night.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon. Good night.